A shard of silence cuts deeper than a blade. You remember the exact moment. They crossed the line, laughed behind your back, or vanished when you needed them most. That crack in your world rode your breath, silent, unbearable. And in that stillness, you felt every weak spot in your armor. Not the one you show, but the one you hide. It wasn't a grand betrayal. It was quiet. An offhand remark. A glance diverted, yet it detonated beneath your skin. You sat through dinners pretending everything was fine, your lips sealed while rage brewed like a storm tide. No sermon, no plea, no tearful confession, only the echo of respect evaporating. We've been taught to beg for apologies, to chase forgiveness like sparrows fleeing a hawk. But respect isn't granted by pleas. It's claimed in the hushed moments when you refuse to speak. Every second you hold that line, you build something irreversible, something they can't touch. Silence is not absence, it is a force. It stretches between words, waiting. In that void, you become a question they can't answer. You become the power they misplaced. You become the mirror showing them their own weakness. They called you cold because warmth was their weapon. They weaponized empathy and shattered you against their expectations. Now, your silence is the blade, your stillness the weight, not for revenge, not for pity, only to forge a shape they'll never recognize. Subscribe if you're ready to stop playing small. Comment below the moment you realized silence was louder than their insults. They watched you shrink when their words grazed your pride. They watched the tremor in your voice as you stuttered apologies for things you never did. In that moment, you became their puppet, your own spine a thread they could pull. But then you felt it a tremor of possibility when you held your breath, instead of bending. A question rose behind your eyes. What if silence could be a refusal to play? You stopped giving them cues. No nods to their demands, no eager eyes searching their faces for validation. You let your gaze rest on your own reflection, unblinking, unyielding. They waited for the familiar collapse, the soft admission. Nothing came. Your lips stayed still. Your chest rose and fell with a quiet insistence. They recognized it instantly. The absence of reaction is a language all its own, and so they tested you. The barbed joke at the meeting, the passive-aggressive friendly reminder, each strike aimed at a reaction. But you had learned that power lies in deficit. The moment they expected your fury, you gave them nothing, only that weightless calm. They recoiled, blinking into the gap you left. You became the question. They became the answerless response. In that blank space, a shift occurred. You felt the ground steady beneath your feet. When you stopped defending yourself, they started defending their own offense. They stumbled over half-formed sentences, patches of doubt flickering in their eyes. You watched them scrabble for a foothold, for a reason to push you back into chaos. They found none. Silence denied them the script they'd written for your collapse. You are not here to fix their discomfort. You are here to remind them they once underestimated you. They believed your absence of noise was weakness. Now they learn that stillness can kill the narrative they constructed. Your silence isn't absence of voice. It is a declaration of who you refuse to be. You've seen the blue flame of rage dancing just behind their calm facade. They sense the power you carry when words fail you. You sense the shift in your own chest when you realize your worth doesn't need affirmation. They called you distant. They called you cold. But distance is respect carved into air. Cold is clarity unclouded by their half-truths. Let them search for cracks. You will not show them. Let them whisper behind your back. You will not turn to watch. This is your forging, unshaken in the eye of the storm. For every slight, every glance, you offer a single response, unyielding quiet. In that void, you reprogram their instincts. They learned to fear the quiet more than the shouted fight. They sent emissaries, friends, colleagues, family to gauge your reaction. Each one carried a breadcrumb of soft coercion, a dinner invitation sugar-coated with guilt, a compliment woven with expectation. They wanted your compliance in any form, but you saw through the kindness couriered as threat. You learned that power hides behind the sweetest words. A wolf in white silk demanding your obedience with a smile. And so you made your choice, to sit unmoved. The invitation lay on the table like a severed limb, and you did not pick it up. Your refusal didn't require explanation. It radiated from the simple calculus. You have nothing left to prove. Every unreturned message, every ignored call, became another brick in the fortress you built around your core. They mistook your silence for surrender. They whispered among themselves, "Maybe we broke him." But you felt the fortress rise inside you with each moment of non-reaction. You felt the clarity settle where chaos once ruled. You were no longer the one scrambling for peace. You became the judge of every exchange. In meetings, they tried to bait you with offhand jabs, humble brags masked as suggestions. You could feel their teeth flexing in the air. Yet you answered only with a neutral nod, or nothing at all. They waited for the crack, but the ground remained unmoving. As the seconds ticked, you watched the doubt shimmer across their faces. Unraveling is contagious. They sensed your calm, and it terrified them. Outside, they painted rumors that you'd become aloof, unreachable, perhaps even broken. Let them. Rumors are whispers in the wind, and you are the solid mountain they swirl around. In your silence, they erected narratives. But a story abandoned is a story without power. Your refusal to feed the rumor mill starved their gossip. They could not sustain a narrative when you offered no reaction. And then, in the echo of their failed ambushes, you witnessed the true cost of their attempts. They bled confidence. Each time they sought your collapse and found your quiet, their certainty frayed. They began to question their own moves. They second-guessed their jokes, their gestures, their words. You transformed the hunter into the hunted without uttering a syllable. Inside, you recognized the shift. The silent observer who once trembled at every slight is gone. In its place rests an unspoken promise. I will not bend. I will not bow. I will not break. This promise is not a mantra to recite. It is a force you radiate in every moment of non-reaction. It echoes in your posture, the steady raise and fall of your chest, the lack of hesitation in your gaze. They tried to break you with absence too. They vanished, unreadable, leaving the question of your worth dangling in limbo. But your silence doesn't panic. It calculates. You left your own absence in its place, a void that sent them scrambling to justify themselves. In that void, they realized you held the power to define the relationship, not them. And so they returned, hat in hand, shadowed by uncertainty. Apologies arrived veiled in charm, requests soft as a sigh. But you did not celebrate their return. You received them with the same stillness, a neutral plane, on which any move would require effort, would reveal intent. They recognized that your silence demanded more than a broken apology. It demanded their own metamorphosis. But metamorphosis is painful. Few endure it. You are not here to rebuild them. You are here to rebuild you. You are here to stand in the silent void they created and claim it as your own territory. Every withheld word, every unspoken emotion, is a testament to your unshakable core. In that core, you carry the knowledge that silence is the loudest proclamation of power. When the world outside clamors for your consent, let your silence be your reply. When they need your approval to feel whole, let your absence become the mirror exposing their dependency. When they brand your quiet as indifference, let them mistake it for dominion. You are neither indifferent nor cruel. You are simply at peace with the force you wield without a sound. This is the path of cold clarity, the way of brutal elegance. Silence does not soothe, it commands. Silence does not comfort, it confronts. Silence does not promise, it declares. They sent their emissaries again, cloaked in concern. A colleague pressing for your feedback on a project. A friend feigning curiosity about your silence. Each plea was a trap, baited to provoke concession. You felt the tendrils of expectation coil around you, demanding you speak, react, justify. But you didn't flinch. You let yourself be the still water beneath their ripples, unbroken by their surface waves. In that unbroken surface, you discovered your power. They gasped at your refusal to fill the void. They waited for reassurance, clarity, explanation, anything that would reassure their own insecurity. Instead, you delivered the absence of reaction with surgical precision. No hesitation, no flicker of doubt. In your silence, you wielded a scalpel, dissecting their motives, exposing their need for control. They recoiled from their own reflection, unable to bear the sight of their hungry eyes. You watched them adapt. They attempted a different approach. Indirect messages, social media breadcrumbs, public praise designed to elicit gratitude. They plastered compliments on your posts, hoping you'd engage, reveal the self they could exploit. But you broke the script. You posted nothing. You liked nothing. You became the void they could not fill. In that void, they felt the first pang of real doubt. If you don't respond, do you even exist to them? They realized their power was an illusion built on your reactions. And with that realization came panic. They overcorrected, flooding your mentions with praise so heavy it collapsed under its own weight. Feigned humility morphed into desperate flattery. They addressed you as if you were a stranger in need of placation. But you stayed unmoved. You did not consume their offerings. You sat above the storm, letting their noise swirl around you like restless wind. They hammered at your gates with gilded words. Your walls stood unblemished. Inside, you felt a shift. The trembling knot of doubt you carried for years began to unravel. The silence that once echoed with your own fear now resonated with calm conviction. You understood that they needed your consent more than you needed theirs. You could deny it indefinitely. You could watch them shrink beneath the weight of their own demands. In that moment, you tasted something new. The freedom of unassailable detachment. They tested you one last time, sending the ultimatum: friendship or exile, loyalty pledged with conditions, veiled threats disguised as concern. You looked at the words on the screen and felt nothing. No pull, no pang, no regret. You let the message sit unread. They sent another. You did not open it. You watched the blue ticks turn to gray, then disappear. In the absence of any signal, you felt the final break. You were no longer bound by their terms. They tried to shame you publicly. A post accusing you of betrayal, painting you as the villain. They counted on your reaction to validate their story, but you withheld it. You learned that the loudest silence is the one that drowns out their noise entirely. Without your reaction, their narrative collapsed into a quiet that they could not control. Their accusation hovered in the air, unanswered and weightless, until it dissolved of its own emptiness. You recognized the moment of true transformation, when your silence ceased to be a tactic and became your nature. You no longer calculated each pause. You simply were still, a constant presence that needed no justification. Their efforts to manipulate, to invade your space, to force your hand, all recoiled against the unyielding stillness you embodied. You became both fortress and phantom, impenetrable yet untouchable. In that unshakable self, you reclaimed every fragment of respect they stole from you. Not by shouting louder, not by explaining deeper, but by letting your silence speak volumes they could never counter. You held the mirror to their desperation and watched them flinch. You learned that true power doesn't demand an audience. It compels attention without uttering a word. Now, in the quiet aftermath, you stand alone but unbroken. The world around you thrums with noise, but you carry the calm of a blade honed to perfection. You know who you are, and they can only guess. Your silence is now the blueprint of your dominion, silent, magnetic, absolute. They resurfaced at your door under the guise of reconciliation, offering fragments of flattery sprinkled with regret. "We miss you," they typed, as if your absence had created a void only they could fill. But you felt no emptiness, only the echo of your own worth. You leaned back in silence, watching the cursor blink like a heartbeat you refused to acknowledge. They sent photos of better times, laughter frozen in pixels, hoping nostalgia would crack your resolve. Yet nostalgia is a poison for the unresolved. You did not soften at the sight of their smiling faces. You did not recall the comfort you once found in their presence. Instead, you saw the strings behind the scene, the implicit bargain of forgiveness traded for compliance, the unspoken expectation that your return would signal their victory. They laid their cards bare, promises to change, pleas for unity, projections of your own failures to guilt you into admission. But guilt is nothing to feed on. You felt no tug in your chest, no whisper of doubt. You watched their words drift across the screen and vanish against the stone wall you directed inside. Your silence turned into solidity. Their emotional barrage bounced back into their own uncertainty. They escalated, shifting tactics into the arena of public opinion, an open letter on social media, a plea typed for all to see. They framed themselves as victims of your silence, portraying you as the antagonist in a drama only they understood. They counted on the court of public sympathy to isolate you, to pressure you into confession. But in that glare of external judgment, you found refuge in your own stillness. The more they raised the volume, the quieter you sat. You became the gravity that held their chaos in orbit. Within you, something crystallized. The silence you wielded was not a shield, but an invocation. It summoned your true self from the shadows of reaction. You felt the contours of your power sharpen, like obsidian forged in absolute darkness. You were no longer reacting to their moves. You were defining the rhythm of the encounter. In every tick of the clock, they awaited a break that would never come. At last, they halted, spent in their attempts to fracture you. Their messages thinned from dozens to a lonely echo. You watched the final plea arrive, raw and unadorned. "Just talk to me." You did not type. You did not read. You let your silence be the answer. It was a verdict more decisive than any argument you could muster. The silence stretched between you two, a canyon carved by unspoken truths. They didn't cross it. They couldn't. In that vast expanse, you stood solitary and sovereign. Your power was no longer contingent on their acknowledgement. It existed in the quiet affirmation of your own presence. You realized that the heart of dominance lies not in the word spoken, but in the word withheld. Here, in the final crucible, you understood. Emotional instinct is a program that can be rewritten. They trained you to respond, and each response strengthened their control. But in the void you created, you found the command line interface of your own psyche. You could input a new directive, no reaction. The program broke. It flickered. It reloaded under your terms. Now, their attempts at manipulation are relics behind you. Your silence is no longer a tactic. It is your nature. It radiates without effort, as natural as your breath. They feel it, even when they don't admit it. It pulls at their awareness like gravity, forcing them to choose adapt or fade away. Few will adapt. Most will fade into the whisper of their own uncertainty. This is the apex of psychological power. To remain unmoved when everything around you trembles. To sit in stillness while the storm rages on. Unperturbed because you are not part of the chaos. You are the I. You are the void. You are the syntax error in their code. The unexpected parameter that crashes the system. And in this power, you reclaim your existence. Not as a plea for validation, but as an immutable force that demands recognition through absence. They will never fully understand why your silence speaks louder than any apology. They will never learn the blueprint you carved into the void. But you do, and that is enough. They tried one last gambit. Proximity. They walked into your shared spaces with forced smiles. Casual touches meant to elicit comfort. A coffee placed on your desk. A tap on the shoulder, simple gestures laden with expectation. They assumed closeness would dissolve your boundary. Instead, you felt the chill of detachment deepen at their approach. Their warmth rebounded off your stillness, lost in the vacuum you created. In that moment, silence became a wall of glass, transparent yet unyielding. They saw you, but couldn't reach you. Every step they took toward you ricocheted back, revealing their own need to be met. They looked at you, searching for a sign of recognition, a flicker of the old devotion they once commanded. Finding none, their faces tightened with frustration. You watched them coil, shrinking in the wake of your absence. You understood then that proximity was not intimacy. It was a demand disguised as gift. They believed presence would piggyback on shared history, that your memories would tether you to them. Yet history is a mirror you choose to face or ignore. You faced it only in your own silence, letting the ghost of past attachments flicker and die. You resisted the nostalgia bait by refusing to conjure those ghosts. Your mind remained empty of their summons. They reverted to politics, public gestures of alliance. A pat on the back in a group setting, an invitation announced to the room as if celebrating your return. They paraded you as a trophy, hoping that public performance would pressure your private compliance. But your silence in a crowd became a vacuum that swallowed their spectacle. Faces brightened when you appeared, dimmed when you sat unmoved. They craved your commentary, your laughter, your approval. You gave them none. Their attempts to dominate the narrative in public only highlighted your sovereignty in private. You drew the lines between your world and theirs so precisely that any attempt to cross spilled into the realm of absurdity. When they spoke your name, they found you already elsewhere in thought, in silence, in a domain they could not trespass. They felt it. The weight of your unspoken decree that your presence was your choice alone. Amid their last embers of coercion flickering out, you felt the full force of your transition. No longer the reactive participant caught in their emotional tides, you became the axis onto which the world turned. Their agendas, their demands, their pleas, all became subordinate to the gravity of your stillness. You summoned a power that needed no ritual, no ceremony, only the simple act of withholding. Inside, a revelation crystallized. Emotional submission had been your undoing. Emotional absence was your armor. You had mistaken responses for connection, forgetting that reactions were currency they spent to buy your allegiance. Now you hoarded your silence like gold, spending it sparingly, valuing each moment of non-reaction as a testament to your dominion. They learned that your price was immeasurable and their offering worthless. You saw the final fracture in their eyes when they realized your silence was neither cruelty nor confusion, it was choice. You were not lost, broken, or confused. You were sovereign. Sovereignty does not explain itself. It stands apart, untouchable, unexplained. They could plead for answers, but sovereignty demands no justification. They could craft theories about your transformation, but sovereignty remains immune to speculation. In the stillness of your reclaimed space, you felt the absence of tension not as relief, but as a new baseline. A baseline where no threat loomed, no betrayal waited to erupt. The silence you carried no longer tracked fear, it embodied certainty. In that certainty, you discovered the final dimension of power, peace divorced from emotion, not a fleeting calm after the storm, but an eternal quiet at the heart of the whirlwind. They gather now only in rumors of your return, whispers of a figure who walks through crowded rooms, unseeable, unprovoked. They debate whether your silence hides a wound or signifies victory, and you remain indifferent. Your silence has become a legend they recite in your absence. Let them speak it. Legends feed on mystery. Their stories of you will crash against the unyielding fact of your quiet. This is not arrogance, it is fact. You are the pause in every sentence they utter about you. You are the breath they hold, waiting for your response. You are the void that defines their edges. They exist only in relation to your silence, and in that relation, you reign. They cannot break what no longer bends. They cannot fill what refuses to open. They cannot claim what remains unclaimed. Your power is not a weapon wielded against them, but a state of being they cannot infiltrate. In the silence that follows their final attempts, you stand unassailable. You are the eye of the storm, the 0 point of emotional gravity, the blueprint of detached dominance. They learn too late that silence is not a retreat. It is the greatest advance. They stand on the edge of your silence, voices fraying at the seams, desperate for any echo of your presence. But you have crossed into a realm beyond reach, where words are debris in the wake of your unspoken verdict. In that expanse, you forged yourself anew, unmarked by their chaos, unbound by their narratives, unmoved by their pleas. This is the truth they fear. Power resides not in the roar, but in the absence of sound. You've stripped away every reaction, every concession, until only your stillness remained. In that stillness, you found clarity, an immutable force that no insult could shatter, no apology could contaminate. Your silence carried the weight of 1,000 unvoiced decrees, each one building an edifice they could neither erode nor surmount. Now your world is a fortress of quiet conviction. The storms of emotion rage around its walls, but inside, an eternal calm holds court. You no longer chase respect, you embody it. You no longer seek approval, you negate its relevance. You no longer respond to their games. You redefine the rules by refusing to play. Emotional instinct is a code, and you have rewritten its parameters. You taught them that silence is not surrender, it is supreme command. In your absence of voice, you discovered presence absolute. They may speak your name into the void, but only your silence answers back. Your reign begins and ends in that quiet domain. There is no applause, no fanfare, no echo. There is only the gravity of your unbroken stillness, the final truth that will outlast every shouted insult and every whispered apology.